Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Nicole Willie-Fenton. I work in UVM's Continuing and Distance Education Department. We're really excited that you're joining us for a discussion today with our digital marketing instructors, Erik Harbison and Bill Rowland, about digital marketing strategies that have been deployed and that will potentially continue to be deployed during this pandemic. So I'm going to get right into the agenda. We've got a lot to talk about today, and we know we have a lot of folks RSVPing and joining us, so we want to make sure we have plenty of time for your questions. The folks joining us on YouTube, you can see in the chat box there, please put your questions there. We will make sure to get as many questions as possible over to Erik and Bill as part of the discussion today. We are recording this webinar event session, so we will be able to share out the presentation and the recording post-webinar. We'll do that soon. And so if you do have other questions that we have not been able to get to, we'll make sure to put our email address up in the chat box, and we can certainly look for your questions as follow-up post-webinar today. So again, I'll go over quick introductions. We'll meet Erik and Bill, find out a little bit more about their background. We're going to talk about pivoting strategies in a pandemic. What to do with that digital spend, what are businesses doing, what maybe they might continue to do in terms of increasing or decreasing digital spends. Changes in search behavior. Bill is our SEO expert. He's going to walk us through what he has seen and what he has been deploying as well. Increase creativity in digital marketing. I think that's probably the theme of this coronavirus pandemic, is increase creativity in all walks of life as to how we've been able to make it through this time. And then looking at what possible digital marketing careers could be really open and really in high demand as a result of some of the shifts. We'll talk a little bit about that. And I do want to share about our Digital Marketing Fundamentals Professional Certificate course. Both Erik and Bill are instructors in that course, and we want to be able to share the opportunity for extended learning if this is a topic that you're really interested in. And I'll also go over an added value. We offer a free career coaching as part of the Digital Marketing Fundamentals Certificate. And today, for your learning, we are offering a digital badge for participation. And I'll explain a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. So stick around with us to learn about that digital badge. So again, as I mentioned, my name is Nicole Willie-Fenton. I'm the Content Marketing Manager, another part of digital marketing in our Continuing and Distance Education Department. Erik Harbison joins us. He is our lead instructor in our Digital Marketing Fundamentals course. He's been building teams and strategies and working in the digital marketing world for over 25 years. And he now focuses on supporting marketing professionals at all levels as a career coach and a mentor through his company, themarketinghelp.co. And what a mentor you are. Thank you, Erik, for being with us today. And Bill joins us. He is our SEO expert and also an instructor in the course. And I've had the actual pleasure of taking his additional course, Advanced SEO. And so I really enjoy learning from Bill, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say today. He's an SEO consultant, previous SEO director and a manager, and he works with e-commerce retailers of all size. And his experience includes strategy, technical optimization, website development, content strategy, and a lot more. Thank you, Bill, for being with us too. I always love to show this slide because there are more people behind the Digital Marketing Fundamentals team as well. So Bill and Erik, you can see their pictures in there again. There's an amazing crew of experts that are instructors in our program, and we're just so fortunate to have them as part of our team. So I want to get into the presentation today. And so this is kind of a big topic, digital marketing strategies in a pandemic. And to try to narrow that down a little bit, I thought that we would start maybe with Erik and explain pivoting some of those strategies. What have you seen that businesses, small, medium, some of the big, huge brands, how have they shifted some of their strategies? And what have you seen that has worked well also? We'll start with Erik and then we'll jump over to Bill too. Erik?
Sure. Yep. So, something that's pretty interesting that we've seen the last couple of months is just this sudden stop of promotion and this sudden start in trying to listen more and understand how a business can help their consumers. So you may have seen less of the promotion and then more of the education and inspiration coming from brands because listen, the pandemic has been kind of a catalyst to wake up brands to say, hey, how well do you really know your audience and how well do you really know your customers? And thus the output of that is you're seeing more of the messaging be impacted to focus on help. We're here to help. How can we help you? Some businesses, it's impacted their business model where it's less about in person, more about online. For others, it's been effective in driving more traffic and demand to their businesses that are 100% digital. But at the highest level, it's really just about being aware that it's time to listen and not time to promote.
Really good point. And I know there's been some shifts in strategies for SEO as well, Bill. Can you share with us what you've seen and what you've been working on as well?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that from our standpoint, it's so just so that everybody's kind of familiar. SEO is generally tends to be a little bit more of a longer term strategy, so that presents some challenges, especially as things started to really materialize and change, and not only in March and April. Obviously, you start seeing how users are searching differently, the types of things that they're searching for. So perhaps things have kind of moved away from things that are desired to things that are needed. So obviously, we all have our different things that we need from a household perspective, and obviously, that has somewhat shifted. From a client perspective, oftentimes you'll have clients that might, they're now questioning their wisdom. Should I be spending money on SEO, or should I be pivoting? And in many cases, we've seen some that have been basically holding the course, and in others, they've said, "Hey, maybe we need to step back and reevaluate what we're doing, and is there a better and more effective way to allocate these resources into something that can help me right now?" Because obviously, it's a pretty challenging business environment. So specifically from our standpoint, I think that really the most recent development is the fact that really COVID-19 and everything around it has kind of shown how, an investment in SEO up to the point where this all started can really benefit a business. It's kind of like a textbook example of, you've developed content, it could be evergreen content and so on, and how that can carry a business through such a difficult time. And so it really kind of jumps out at us from that perspective, or at least jumps out to me.
From an SEO perspective, Bill, are you making recommendations on new content? And how do you walk that line of including content that is related to the quarantine, but not quarantine all the time content? Where is that balance, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that, so first of all, from my perspective, it's challenging because generally speaking, everything that we try to do is going to be data driven. And oftentimes, whether you use a tool like, Google Ads Planner or some other, keyword research tool of preference, generally there's not a lot of information that we can still use to point to, for example, COVID-19 or coronavirus, because essentially a lot of that stuff has actually been removed from, Google doesn't actually provide that. So up to a point, you have to understand, okay, so what are, I look at an individual client or an individual business and say, all right, so certainly, from a basic standpoint, we need to tell tell our current clients and prospects what's going on, how is what we're doing being affected, things like hours of operation and so on and so forth. And then, an offshoot would be some logical types of things that people would clearly be curious about. So, for example, we have one client that's in the student loan space, and as you know, at the University of Vermont and so on, there's a lot of upheaval. We don't really necessarily always know exactly what's going on in all these places. So, you'd like to be able to create content around, well, what's going to happen, for example, for the fall semester, and the problem being is we might not even know. So, I think that there's the basic information right up in front just from a logical standpoint that you'd want to create, and then oftentimes and what I'm doing for some others is really looking at how can we do and pursue strategies that are going to help us overall in an evergreen way, such as expanding contents, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, or EAT, which is a big a big buzzword these days from an SEO perspective.
Great. Thank you for that perspective. Erik, I want to toss this back to you as well. You said something in a recent interview about businesses can pivot some of their strategies to create more communities with their customers. Can you expand on that a little bit? What have you seen in that space that's been successful, and what are you advising some folks to do as well?
Sure. So, I mean, what you tend to see is, again, the brands looking to listen more to their customers and their audiences. And, what better way to do that than in the avenues that they're currently engaging with the brand in? So the Facebook page, Some businesses are providing separate Slack communities at various levels. It could be for the best customers. It could be for all customers. But how do you get closer to your customers to just listen to understand what are their pain points? What do they need? Now, obviously, this depends on the industry that you're in and the product or service that you provide. But I think regardless of what that is, how are you opening that feedback loop so that it can be a little bit more direct and a little bit more conversational? So teams that have customer support teams, maybe there's more outbound calls that are happening as opposed to just reacting. Calling specific clients, just checking in. And now again, it doesn't scale for large brands, but again, if you're the small business owner, when's the last time that you survey your audience just to see how they're doing? And be able to provide some support in that way. An example of this could be, you have some small to medium-sized businesses that may, after asking these questions and listening to their customers, realize that they can actually develop a different product that may address those needs. Whether it's a shift in manufacturing or a shift in the products that they're delivering, or service lines where we may have been providing, service A, but there's actually a complementary service we can package and bring to our customers now because we understand that they don't need so much of what we're giving them, but they need us plus something else. And it really is, again, it's great to see those that are doing it, at a large level. Look at, some of the manufacturers like Ford and others that have just flipped their model to stop making cars, start making ventilators or face masks or some of the things that we need. But then it's a shame to see some of these businesses miss the opportunity, and just the ones that are just promoting and just missing that opportunity of getting closer to their customers.
And I'd like to jump in there, Eric, because I really think that you make a good point. And from a small business standpoint, something like the opportunity for a smaller business to take advantage is pretty huge here. And perfect example was I have my brother-in-law actually owns a small high fashion business in Manhattan. And I heard a story where basically he had actually called a client and said, "Hey, just contacting you. I mean, once again, he deals with high fashion, Italian, like cashmere and so on." And in short, he contacted a regular a client or customer to say, "Hey, when will you be placing your order for the coming year?" And rather than just reaching out and saying, "Hey, how is everything doing?" The client sent him back basically a picture of a burned out store, which really, needless to say, made me feel sad. First of all, for her. But beyond that, just the fact that he was somewhat tone deaf to what's going on in Manhattan and what had occurred. So it's really an opportunity for somebody to just very simply, it could be a quick email, it could be a brief telephone call, but it really is an opportunity.
Great points. And I have found too that there's been a lot more phone calls and a lot more phone conversations, and I think it's pretty awesome. And it seems that people are really open to that as well. So I want to shift the questions slightly here to, I'm sure this question comes up quite a bit, Erik, as well. Do I go up or down in my spending right now? And I would imagine some of that depends on what you're advertising and what you're spending the money on in terms of your digital spend. But how are you answering that kind of question?
Yeah. I mean, a way to approach it is just, can I just maintain, right? So if my budget was X, is about maintaining what my spend was, and the only thing that may change is my messaging. If my messaging is changing, then maybe my metrics and goals will change too, because it's less about sales and more about awareness and education, but I've maintained my spend. Now, if you're somebody who's, your business product or service is a non-essential, well, yeah, it probably makes sense to scale down or ratchet back some of your spending. And then on the flip side, if you're an essential, you have something of value that can help the audience or larger audiences, well, then you're probably increasing, because what's happening is if the majority of the businesses are pulling back on spend, then the rate or the prices or the cost per clicks can decrease. So even if you're maintaining or cutting back or spending more, it may be at a reduced rate just because of the overall depression of spending happening in the market. Couple that with some of the boycotts and spending that are happening, then the inventory becomes a little bit more open, and it might be a little bit more flexible for you to maintain your presence, but at a lower level. So I guess answering your question, it really is, there's 3 tiers that are an option. It just really depends on what it is that your product or service is.
What about businesses that have had to shift that product and that service, if you will? Maybe they still have the same product, but they're offering it in a different way. And I think a lot about the restaurants and the breweries and the type of businesses that would have never had a curbside or delivery. And so how do you help folks know that that's an option? And are people putting money behind some of the spends to communicate out that their business model has shifted?
So for the local businesses that you're describing, yes, absolutely. What a joy to announce that we can still serve you as a local business. So companies like that investing in ad spend, absolutely an option because of there's a geo-targeted region that they're trying to make aware of their offerings. But the other thing to take away from this is, instead of getting into this throw money at the problem, it also should shape and open up businesses to think about their long-term strategies, like their owned media assets and potential earned media assets. So take that same example of the small business. Hey, we now have curbside and delivery. Well, what if I send an email to the most active customers in my database and let them know first? And then I have my community of my top 50 customers, and I empowered them with a little bit of an incentive to go get the word out. And I haven't spent a dollar in any advertising, but I've leveraged the fact that I've built a community, and I listen, and I know that I know my customers, and I have a very strong relationship with them. So I think the paying to get the word out is an option, but I think knowing that this may happen again and again, are you kind of building a recession-proof model with your business where you are always connecting with your customers so that at the drop of a hat, if you need to get the word out, you don't need to worry about if you have the budget to do so.
Bill, I'm curious from your perspective, and I know, spend doesn't really play into SEO here, but wondering from your perspective, and I know SEO is more of a long-term strategy, but in terms of shorter-term strategies related to products or services that would be of need for folks during the pandemic, have SEO strategies changed for those particular services and products that you have seen that might not have otherwise kind of been the focus of SEO?
Well, I mean, I think so generally, when I look at, optimizing for specific, a specific page or specific product or so on, I mean, generally, and going back to, let's say, March or April, when you're not really sure how long could this last and so on. And obviously it's as we found, it's going to be a much longer challenge, shall we say. Historically, we haven't really focused on something that might just be changing conceivably in the next 2 months or so, because generally it will take anywhere between 2 to 3 months to really start hopefully gaining some traction. That notwithstanding, though, I mean, I think that certainly from a common sense standpoint, when you look at how people are searching, generally speaking, and when you're kind of auditing, what some other competitors may be doing, and some of the discussion, and for example, there was some great discussion from a variety of different, online marketing and SEO related sites where they would actually get together every week and talk about, well, how are you approaching this from an optimization standpoint? And once again, crafting lots and lots of content that ideally is going to perform well long term. It's kind of tough to do that when we don't really know how things may shift. So I think that in many cases, and using Erik's example as one, and that is like, what can we do right now to become more relevant, especially in light of COVID-19, and develop content and cultivate topics that once again are going to be relevant not only to our current situation, but more so even going forward.
And I think that's a great segue into changes in search behavior, because we probably wouldn't have been looking for toilet paper before this nearly as much, or masks and things like that. So what have you seen that has changed in the way people are searching? And then how can businesses react to that?
Well, I mean, generally we've seen, as I described earlier, the types of products that people are certainly searching for now has changed to some degree. And then beyond that, there are a lot of other variants and modifiers that are being used in typically common searches that people should then be aware of. So think about it. How do we, we're doing much more. We're doing many more activities at home now. So a variable or a variant like as at home, or a term like homeschooling, everything around homeschooling, remote learning, all of those different types of things certainly have really come to the fore from a search behavior standpoint. Remote is another variant commonly used. Also indoor. Focus. Think about it. Everybody's trying to get exercise. Uh, what are some individual unique workouts that you can do, whether it be at home or body weight exercises? All of these different types of things, and it kind of makes sense when you really think about it. But it really kind of hit me in the head as I'm doing some of the keyword research, as I'm doing some reading to see, hey, these are all the ways that some search behavior has really changed, and honestly, it seems like that's probably going to be continuing at least for the indefinite future, right?
Erik, do you have any thoughts? I know we're kind of focusing in and narrowing in on SEO and search behavior, but what have you been seeing that have been some shifts in consumer behavior, even just the volume of people online? I've seen statistics of YouTube. Almost, I think we've broken YouTube, not really, but it seems like there's that potential. What is your perspective on that?
I mean, it is interesting to see some of the impacts. Some are assumed to happen, like e-commerce. I saw one stat about the growth of e-commerce sales. 3 times greater than what it was a year ago. Obviously, because there's more people focused online. But what are they buying? Well, sure, you're buying essentials. You're looking for the value pack of sanitizer and wipes and everything else. But maybe you're making some of these other purchases tied to what Bill's saying, which is if as a audience we are at home, well then our propensity to purchase may be a little bit higher. And what that does is opens the door for some companies to spin up an opportunity for online e-commerce if maybe they were only doing it in person before. Or what's another model that's been popular now is a membership model. So now that everyone is kind of not able to go somewhere, well, what if I were able to increase the value by giving you something digitally for a monthly membership down the road? And think about that. That could apply to anyone that has the ability to exchange value digitally. It could be another model that kind of opens up in this sort of world. Plus, think of the artisans and the craft makers, the Etsy shops and stores where now I have the time to, build the bottle opener, the little trinket thing, and now there's an audience that may want to purchase it. So I think the behaviors that change is we're certainly spending more time online, but then doing what? Gaining information, doubling down and investing in ourselves, or purchasing some of these want products as opposed to the need products.
That's a good point too. And as we, as Bill mentioned too, this challenge that we're facing in terms of coronavirus is, while things are opening back up again, it's still very present. And so businesses must be having conversations about, okay, what else needs to continue? What else needs to change in the short term? And then long term, looking ahead, because if there wasn't any pandemic planning previously, I suspect there will be now. So maybe Erik, let's go back to you on that too. What are you advising, or what are you seeing that businesses can be thinking about in terms of marketing planning, short and long term?
Yeah, I'd say short term would just be gut checking yourself as a business. How many of those watching today run a business or work in a business? And then ask yourself, when's the last time you asked your audience to truly get a sense for how are they, what can we do to help, and ask those 2 specific questions, get that feedback ASAP, and I guarantee that will influence maybe some things you invest in for the long term. Secondly, like I said before, things like SEO and the right content are worth investing in now for the long term, because like Bill was saying, the page on here are our procedures when we are in a pandemic, well, that's kind of evergreen now. So invest the time now to build out that content and that information so that all you need to do is either keep it there for long term, knowing that it may go through its ebbs and flows of prominence. The other thing from a planning standpoint, to your point, pandemic planning, um, is our marketing budgets now going to have a line item for contingency budgets for, I mean, maybe not pandemic specifically, but maybe call it an emergency fund should there be another macro impact to our business? I mean, I'd like to think that there's a percentage of a budget now that marketers and brands and businesses can find, as small as the brewery and the pizza shop. There's maybe a couple $100 they put aside, a couple thousand they put aside just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, any thoughts as to what you're seeing or advising in terms of SEO? And I know we talked a little bit about this, but as you're looking forward in some of the planning?
Well, I mean, I think that from our standpoint, a lot of what I'm kind of advising our clients to do is that this kind of gives you an opportunity to kind of step back and look at a lot of what we typically will still review, and that is like looking at the basics, making sure that the foundation is sound, and that will allow us to pivot as we need to going forward. So that means like looking at how well is the website performing? Is it really performing as well as it should? Are there some basic and fundamental things that you can work on, regardless of the presence of COVID or any other situation? So, for example, for one client, we sat down, we reviewed a number of very high-profile pages that were already performing well, but is there a way that we can squeeze a little bit more, get a little bit more juice from the squeeze, so to speak? So really, from a strategic standpoint, a lot of it is really from our perspective, return to our long-term planning, but with the knowledge that something can occur just like a COVID or something else, God forbid.
Right.
One last thing on that point is that when it comes to planning, is that there's an asterisk on the months of maybe March, April, May, June of 2020, that if I'm trying to comp a specific number, or if I'm trying to forecast search volumes or other things, I need to keep that in mind for when I'm preparing for what my expectations are for the next 6, 8, 12 months.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things that we have a challenge with. We have one client who, I mean, we're doing really well from an organic growth standpoint, lots of traffic, but they're like, well, wait a minute, we're not converting nearly as much. I'm like, well, there is a pandemic going on, and so, while yeah, which is a challenge because on one hand you're like, well, the reason why we're here is to produce conversions, um, but you have to have a little bit of wiggle room there given the circumstances. So to Erik's point, especially going forward, comping last year's sales, given the current situation, I think you have to be realistic about that.
We do have a question here that I wanted to pause and focus on here from Sherry Lynn. What about marketing and media messaging out for nonprofit or government organizations? These may be about programs or awareness or resources. It's hard to compete, and I can imagine that. Erik, maybe thoughts on messaging and media that may be a little bit more focused in nonprofit and government?
Yeah, I mean, it would have to go back with understanding who you're trying to target. If everyone is promoting in Facebook or in social media, are you in LinkedIn? Are you building messaging in Pinterest? Are you, trying to have the conversation in a private community, or are you effectively leveraging your emails? So it may be more of, are you saying the message that you want to say to the right audience, but are you saying it in a different vehicle than maybe some of the others where it may be a little too crowded? That could include offline messaging as well. Direct mail pieces. A lot of people at home, chances are walking to the mailbox every day is kind of a fun thing to do nowadays. So that might be a way to get some attention and then drive them to a specific webinar, community, or phone number.
It's a really good point. Thank you for that. We have another question too that I think is a really interesting question. How are colleges changing their business model in this environment? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. And I think what we're doing today, this kind of discussion is one of the models that have shifted here at the University of Vermont. We certainly were talking about our digital marketing fundamentals program in other webinars and information sessions, but now we're shifting a lot of the content that we might do in these kind of events to focus on news and relevant and strategies that can help businesses. So thinking about more content for the community, a little bit less on actual program promotion, which we would have done a lot more of previously. So there's one example. There are many, many more. But also just thinking about what both of you have seen as being instructors in our program, and you have a lens over so many different types of students and their roles. Any examples that you've seen of what colleges are doing for shifting and what you think's been a good choice?
I mean, from my standpoint, I can't speak directly to other colleges beyond University of Vermont, but I do think that, it would probably behoove all schools to once again look at how they can still connect people, because at the end of the day, yes, we're all communicating through this vehicle, whether it be on YouTube or what have you, but really at the end of the day, it's still personal communication, how you can cultivate that, how schools can once again bring a tribe of people together to not only benefit from one another and their experiences, but how to kind of like create a cohesive cohort so that as you progress with your studies, what can you do to move forward together? Because generally speaking, a group of people can be much more powerful, and your connections in between people can be make success much more likely as opposed to just trying to do it all yourself. And so I think that really cultivating that relationship and that connection, whether it be through UVM or through another school, is certainly something that schools should be looking closely at.
Eric, do you have any follow-up to that?
I would just say, how can you still provide value in an online experience, a virtual learning experience? Because this has got to impact instruction design, professors in terms of not just how they instruct, but what they're instructing students to do in a learning environment. I mean, in other courses that I'm part of, I've seen virtual environments actually increase the participation and productivity of students around specific projects. So, I mean, right now it's kind of the here and now. Does it look the same in 6 to 12 months? Not sure, but is there a way to ensure that there's an option for virtual learning that still provides value? Again, it isn't just about copy pasting the content into a PowerPoint. Like, there's different things that have to be considered, understanding how students learn virtually.
It's a really good point, and we've been talking a lot and we're actually starting to build content around the fact that remote learning is not the same as an online course. It's not the same as the instructional design that goes into digital marketing fundamentals, an 8-week intense, fundamental in digital marketing. It's very different than the switch to remote learning that the entire world experienced. We'll get over to King Street Center's question in just a few minutes here, but I wanted to kind of come back to what stays and what goes. What are brands learning from this, and what can they learn? And maybe, Eric, if you could try to think of big brand and then small brand, or big businesses and small, because you gave a great example in an interview recently too about, I think it was Nike, their example of shifting their messaging. And so what are you thinking may continue, and what will brands maybe learn from this experience from your perspective?
I think for both big and small brands, I mean, the Nike example is basically, for years and years we were told to just do it. And then recently they released, I think it was a logo that says "just don't do it," tied to social distancing, stay at home. So you think about that, you're like, wow, for Nike to pivot, that's pretty interesting. So the takeaway, whether you're Nike again or the brewery, am I ready to pivot quickly on my messaging? Meaning, my brand is my brand. I know what my brand is. Do I know it well enough that I can quickly pivot to be still relevant to support a message that's necessary in a pandemic? I'd say what goes could be, when it comes to brands trying to really understand this new way of marketing, do I have the right team members on board? Because remember, there's a whole nother discussion about how this impacts the marketing job opportunities. But brands now have the opportunity to upgrade at any position. So I'm probably thinking, if I'm a hiring manager for a marketing team, where can I upgrade in my talent? Who can I bring on that really gets our brand, understands our message, is empathetic towards what's happening with our customers? So that might be another learning from this pandemic, because some brands may have been caught off guard, and the person in charge of their social media didn't really do it very effectively. Thus, they know they can improve in that position.
Really good points too. Bill, perspective on what you would anticipate that brands could be learning from this experience?
I mean, from from what I've experienced, it kind of echoes what Eric had just said, and that is the ability to pivot pretty quickly and to respond based on a given circumstance. So we had one client that was very, very reluctant in terms of directly addressing what's going on around COVID, how it's affecting their business, what are they going to do about it? And I really think that it kind of left them, it took them literally like 2 months to figure out how they wanted to respond. And they're in a regulated environment, which I mean, I can understand that can create maybe a little bit more greater requirement for some thought, and you can't make changes perhaps as quickly as what you'd like just because of the legal requirements. But I do think that you have to be able and willing to pivot and to be able to deliver that message and respond to people and make sure that it's done in a responsible, respectful way. And I've just it kind of makes me chuckle when I see these companies that really aren't able to do that. And hopefully this is kind of like instilled in them an example of how they really should be able to respond quickly. And like I said, SEO is not necessarily a speedy process, but certainly the ability to make a conscious choice and implement that choice right away is something that I think every business will find helpful.
It's a good point too. And I want to come back to a few questions that have come in as well. I want to come back to King Street Center's question. Maybe Eric, I'm not sure if you might have a thought of an example of how one might promote oneself specifically on Pinterest during the pandemic.
Sure. So I think in reference to the nonprofit question, I gave that as an example. A thought here is just thinking about how to leverage vehicles that could connect with your audience where others aren't. So for Pinterest, I mean, think about it. It's all about images. It's all about photos. But for a nonprofit, what if you create an infographic that supports the success that your nonprofit has had with number of individuals helped, number of carers serviced for? I mean, just think of an image that visually depicts your success. And then you can use that as the hub and then drive traffic to that hub to engage on Pinterest, but also be found inside of Pinterest that has a pretty large audience in terms of targeting that could also increase awareness about your nonprofit and eventually, potentially, driving them to other landing pages or websites.
It's a good point too, and I think that would apply on all the other social channels as well, especially, think about Instagram, which is also clearly very visual. Great question here, also from one of our UVM colleagues. So happy to see College of Engineering and Mathematics Sciences and with us today. It seems as though top leadership, CEOs, boards has been leveraged for messaging during this time. What are some recommendations or how to pivot marketing plans and shift spending? We've been talking a little bit about that. So maybe come back to shifting spending on some messaging as well. Is that something that you've been seeing?
Well, I think the spend is shifted based off of because you got to change the objective before you change the spend. So if the objective now is let's find platforms for our CEO to give their message, well, then if it's all about awareness and reach, well, then let's take some money from paid search where we're driving registrations and let's invest it in getting on a podcast, for example, where we can either sponsor the podcast or find ways to get our CEO on that conversation because all we're trying to do is get awareness for the message, which could be further measured by traffic it drives, et cetera. But again, just change the objective and that'll identify where you need to invest the dollars.
That's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that too. I want to come back to a point that you made a little bit earlier, Eric, job opportunities. So I think this is a really interesting point that for the most part, I think we've proven that the world can work remote for the most part. There's obviously essential workers that we have relied so heavily on and so thankful for them going into the retail locations like grocery stores and various different organizations that we needed. But most everybody else was working at home when possible. And so I think it opens up an opportunity for businesses to expand their network of potential digital marketing employees. Are you finding that's true? And in this space of kind of the most in-demand digital marketing skills, are there any skills that are rising to the top as a result of what's been happening?
I mean, from my standpoint, I can tell you that it certainly there's been a big demand with regards to people that have a solid understanding from whether it be SEO, SEM, and some of the other digital, channels. Because once again, it allows you to be super flexible, and then obviously quite a bit more volume, quite a bit more search demand, etc. I mean, businesses are looking at building out their online presence. So I mean, it's been a natural. It's been great to see. Although I'm sorry to know what the cause of that might have been, but it certainly benefits those that are in that field. That's for sure.
That's a good point. Eric, what do you think about that? What have you been seeing as you're advising folks on their careers too?
Yeah, well, I think it's the remote responsibility you mentioned earlier about remote learning is different. Well, working remote for a marketing position is different also. I mean, everyone's accountable. There's always accountability for any job, but when it comes to marketing roles that are 100% accountable day one, there is a constant need for over communication, being a great communicator. I've seen a lot of marketers in positions remote for the first time not do well because they weren't really sure how to effectively communicate, and they thought it was like it's just different than working in an office. So being aware of how well you do operate in those remote situations is a must, because yes, that is pretty much the job opportunities that exist. The appetite for roles, and I'll say this, I know back, it was like third week of March, I remember doing a search in LinkedIn, just LinkedIn, for jobs that were available and posted in the last week. And across all these digital marketing titles, hundreds, thousands of positions that still exist. Now, this is just LinkedIn, and this is just the US.
Right.
So when I saw that, it was kind of an indicator to me that said, hey, there are still people that need marketers in terms of the roles and the specific things they do. What became popular were SEO positions and content positions. Not that the others weren't being found, but these seem to be the ones that were popping up because these are brands looking to invest in some of these long-term strategies. But content is a word everyone uses, and content is I think a discipline or a focus that is going to be pretty marketable, not just now, but if I fast forward in the next 8 to 12 months. And what I mean by that is, ability to write, content writing, copywriting, design skills to create ads, writing emails and nurture series that are going to help bring people along. So those are the sorts of skills I think are going to be pretty important.
Absolutely. We have seen, I mean, content is what I live and breathe. And just the increase in the amount of videos and podcasts and opportunities to connect, I think has been really a value add as a result of the pandemic. So I do want to give a plug for the program, because the things that we've been talking about and the career opportunities that you were mentioning often are the result of the fundamentals course. I talked to so many students, I talked to one this morning, that this course gave him the fundamentals to be able to understand a much broader spectrum of marketing and of digital. And then what I think is so fascinating about this course too is that then you can kind of focus in on certain areas. For example, if SEO is something that you're super interested in, there's a week on it that Bill teaches, but there's also some short intensive courses that we offer as kind of add-ons and kind of layering up that skill set, for advanced SEO and advanced storytelling and advanced data-driven decision-making for Google Analytics. And so the digital marketing fundamentals gives you that baseline, and then you can really kind of layer on the additional experience. So I just thought, Eric, maybe you could just take a second, because the focus of this isn't the course, but I just want you to just give us a snapshot of why this is a great fundamentals course, and also weaving in the fact that it's taught by experts like you. We showed that slide in the beginning. So just give us a quick overview as to what the course is about and some of the information on the slides.
Sure. So I think, starting with who's it for. So if you're thinking about this, really it's somebody who's looking to become a career switcher, looking to become focused on marketing because you're doing accounting or finance or HR. Now you want to do marketing. This is a great course for you. You just started your marketing career. You want to level up your skills and knowledge, not just depth, but also breadth. This is a course for you. And even if you're a marketing manager, right, VP of marketing, you've done a great job advancing your career. Now you have a team you need to hire, but you need to understand exactly how these channels actually work together. This is a great course for you too. So the benefits, as you just gave that example, there's a much deeper and wider understanding of how digital marketing channels work. But also it's walking away with assets to advance, whether it's the interview, the promotion. You tie it all together in building a digital marketing plan, which has been immensely helpful for students in the feedback about finally connecting the dots and finally knowing how to be strategic when maybe all they knew how to do before was tactical execution. That coupled with, like you mentioned, access to our instructors, but not just for the 8 weeks, for your lifetime. And Bill, myself, other instructors still get emails from students that were in the course months and years ago, and we're happy to help them with their day-to-day or career advancement.
And that's true. The gentleman I spoke with this morning, who's a graduate of the program, echoed that as well. So I hear that from students, and I really appreciate you sharing that information. This is just a quick slide that I just wanted to show some of the things that are the benefits and the results of the digital marketing fundamentals. And we have a question that I see from Serena that says, do you have any advice on how to get a digital marketing job without any prior experience? I'm going to say take the course because you can walk out of the course with an example of a digital marketing plan and a capstone project. You can articulate the value of integrated marketing campaigns across channels. You can recognize key performance indicators, improve, return on the investment. You can speak this language and have an end product, the capstone product, to show the example of your learning. Is that a good assessment of maybe, or a good response to that question?
For Serena's question, yes. That exact question we see a ton, and thus the course is a solution. In addition to the learning, there's nothing wrong with just executing and gaining hands-on experience yourself. And again, that's another thing that we cover in the course on how to set you up for continued, how do I get hands-on experience so that I can prepare myself for my first digital marketing job.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something there, just to touch on what Serena's looking for. And a lot of times I've spoken with a lot of people throughout the course and beyond, and that is, I think the biggest thing that we typically look for, and once again, my world is SEO, but I know that it's relevant elsewhere. And that is, you have to kind of demonstrate your interest, and that you're actually able and willing to do something. Oftentimes you'll kind of come, I'll encounter in the past when I've been hiring candidates and they're like, oh yeah, SEO, this and that, and so on and so forth, and I'll say, well, so what have you done? Can you show me like a project that you did or whatever? It's like, no, but I'm itching to get started. I'm like, well, that's great, but I mean, if you haven't really done anything, and certainly taking the course is one way to do it. Another might be to, you could build a website, or you could do a lot of, a number of other things that can kind of demonstrate that interest. But certainly go out there, and even if you're not really sure of the channel that you're most interested in, pursue something, do something so that you can point to that to a prospective employer to say, I'm so interested that I went out and I did X. And it could be the course or it could be something else.
It's a really good point. Thank you so much. We do have more questions coming in specifically kind of about the coursework. And I do want to come back to both Erik and Bill about just kind of some thoughts as we wrap up. Those shifts in digital marketing strategies as a result of the pandemic. So just prepping you both that I'm going to come back to you for those parting words. But we have a few more questions about the coursework, and I really appreciate that from our audience as well. Kanika asks, what coursework would you suggest for someone who already has marketing experience and has basic tools for digital marketing? And Erik, I think you touch on this sometimes because maybe there's an area that you want to go deeper into. And so you're particularly interested in the Google Analytics, the data, the driven information. and so you cover that in the fundamentals, but then maybe also some of the short courses that are kind of more of a boot camp style. Can you just maybe expand on Kanika's question?
Yeah, I mean, not knowing exactly what Kinika wants to do, but just assuming that she's in a position to look for other ways to gain some learning in certain topics. Well, in addition to the course we have here, I would suggest boot camp, like, what is the thing you want to learn more about? And if it's social media, then Facebook's got a certification. If it's content marketing, social media, HubSpot's got a certification. Certifications and courses, here's what I'll say. Certifications and courses are great ways to kind of learn things, maybe take a quiz. But that does not, to Bill's point, that does not necessarily, that's not where it ends. How do you take that information and apply it to do something? So in Kanika's case, I'd say maybe you don't need a course. Maybe what you need to do is create a personal brand site and run a campaign against it. And that is much more valuable in an interview or preparing yourself for learning by actually doing. So that would be some thoughts there.
Great. I think that's great. And maybe, Serena, that might help to answer your question that I'm seeing. It's a little bit of a follow-up to Kanika's as well. Eduardo says, how do we present the result to our client if we are social media consulting? And so reporting is a key part of success in digital marketing. I'd like to hear from both of you, and I know social media Bill isn't your area of expertise, but just what kind of reporting do you find valuable for your clients? And Erik, maybe your thoughts on that too. We'll start with Bill.
Well, I mean, I think that, Eduardo, it all kind of comes down to where do you start? I mean, before you even start any kind of a campaign, you kind of have to define what exactly is it that you're trying to do and how you're going to measure that. So the time to really figure out what should my report look like is not kind of after it happens. It really should be starting before. So that's one thing that I would suggest. Beyond that, then what are you really trying to accomplish? I mean, so for example, are you trying to promote, trying to promote your brand? And if so, how ultimately are you going to measure that? So, to step back, you might say, one way to determine how helpful that might be is, let's say, going back to Erik, when you and I were working with, let's say, a large coffee manufacturer, as I remember, and it was a big social media thing, and we were doing Facebook, like a big Facebook, I guess it was called coffee chat, coffee talk, something like that. So I think that at the time we looked at how many participants did we have. We looked at how many direct interactions occurred. Were there any follow-up messages, things like that. So I guess in terms of the reporting, to get back to Eduardo's question, and that is, I would kind of craft it around what you've already established the goals to be, and make sure that before you even start, you've kind of agreed on what you should be looking at. What actually is that, key performance indicator? And as a result, what I've found helpful is, yeah, you could throw a lot of numbers at a client, but generally what I found is making sure that it's a graphical presentation that clearly indicates how well or how poorly you're doing, or this particular campaign is doing, and then iterate from there. So Erik, I don't know if that is consistent with what you would typically do, but
Yeah, everything Bill said. The most important thing, Eduardo, is congratulations if you sold, an engagement before knowing what to report on. But establishing objectives first is number one. So I'm going to guess here in social media consulting, if it's about engagement, so you're managing a brand's Facebook page, well, then you probably want to talk about the quality of the audience that you're bringing to the social network. So engagement could be something that you talk about, right? Talk about how great the audience is responding to the posts you're making. If you're doing paid social media consulting and you're actually in charge of spending money to make money, well, that absolutely ROI, how much money, how much revenue did we generate for what we spent, or how many leads did we generate for what we spent, and, and having those sorts of metrics in play. But again, this is like how long is a piece of string sort of question, but those are some ideas on how you may want to think about reporting.
and one thing that I'd like to add there, Erik, because you just prompted that, and that is, like, when you're starting with a company, it's really important for you to be able to effectively identify how productive you're being. It's really important to make sure that they also have an indication of, like, for example, like, how much does it cost for them to sell something. And so as a result, if it's costing you, I don't know, $5 to generate a lead, if they're selling something that retails for $4.50, well, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. So it's really important that they have an understanding of like what can they devote towards your efforts to make it economically sound.
Great. Thank you both for answering that question. And I know Zoe or Zoe, I'm not sure which way, has a question. We're going to get to that in just a second. Bill, maybe take a quick look at it because it's about SEO, and I'll come back to you in a minute. I do want to share about the opportunity to demonstrate what you've learned today. So what a great way to showcase your skill set and your knowledge base that you're actively seeking in terms of digital marketing strategies and shifts in a pandemic, and that is our digital badge for participation. So we've got a learn and earn badge for participation in the webinar today. There's a little bit of information as to what you can do with it, what are some of the benefits. A lot of people put them on their LinkedIn profile. It's kind of today's resume, is to show those badges and the accumulation of knowledge that you have under your belt. How it works, a little bit of information there. We will include the link to the landing page that shares where you can claim your badge in our follow-up email with a recording of the webinar as well. And then you'll get an email from Acclaim, and then you can follow kind of the links to get the badge and claim your badge. I also did want to share, we've talked a little bit about the Digital Marketing Fundamentals course, and I have to put a plug in for that because it's an amazing course. It fills up very quickly. We do have another course session starting July 15th. You may want to inquire if there are some seats left. We will have another one, probably starting, Eric, maybe you can correct me, in October, might sound about right. And the exciting thing that I did want to share with everybody today is that we are offering a 25% discount on the fundamentals up until August 1st. So if it's something that you're thinking about, you have an opportunity to save even more money on a course that can help maybe catapult you into a digital marketing career, or considering one of those different positions that Eric was talking about have grown considerably. The other amazing thing about our Digital Marketing Fundamentals course is this added add-on at no charge. You have the opportunity to work with a career coach, and she's fantastic. It's at kind of the end of the, midway through the course. You can choose to work with Sue Shlom and gain her experience. She's a corporate recruiter and an instructor in this course as well. And the results that I hear from students are really phenomenal. And so if you haven't dusted off that resume, or you want some advice on interviewing and coaching in that, this is a really amazing opportunity that so many students take advantage of as part of the Digital Marketing Fundamentals. So I want to come back to Bill, hopefully give you a chance to read that question and come up with something brilliant. No pressure. Since SEO is a long-term strategy, has there been something brand new that's appeared because of the pandemic that could help companies to have more of an all-encompassing messaging strategy going forward?
Well, I mean, really, the biggest thing that happened was back in early May. There was a core algorithm update, and so that actually had an effect on a lot of different types of businesses. So some of the ones that were really most affected, obviously travel, real estate, health, as you can imagine. And the challenge with that though is that we're still trying to assess what was the root effect. In short, a lot of it was it's been generally determined that a lot of it was focused around how people's search habits are different. And the problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily affect messaging and how you should communicate yourself. What it really did was kind of underlie a lot of what we as SEOs kind of understand, based on Google's search quality rater guidelines, which the most recent version was published back in December. And in short, it seems as though, based on, I think Neil Patel had spoken, had a post on it recently, and he was talking about, it seems as though most of these sites that were negatively affected had thin content, hadn't been updated in some time, or had really fundamental or basic optimization errors. And the problem being is, like, that's nothing new. So you want your websites to work well. You want to have robust content that's relevant and focused around serving your clients' needs. And then you want to make sure that if there are any basic errors present, you want to eliminate those. So that includes everything from spelling errors to subtle poor optimization of headings and things like that. So unfortunately, yes, there have been a significant change. The problem being is, does that necessarily affect how you would, broadly message to all of your prospects and to your existing clients? And really the answer is no. It basically is just forcing you to kind of look within to do some things that perhaps maybe you hadn't done in the past. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's what I got.
I think it's good advice, pandemic or no pandemic, just really making sure that everything's working as effectively as possible.
Exactly.
Erik, any last thoughts on just things that you're seeing potentially coming out of a pandemic, which I know we're still in it, but just as people are starting to get more comfortable with some of the shifts in the strategies, any last bits of advice for folks today?
I mean, really just the common thread that could be relevant to every business, big or small, is, really, do you have an answer to the question of how can we help you that you're asking your customers? Do you have that answer, and are you doing something about it? And then secondly, do you have a pandemic marketing plan already outlined for the next time? And whether it's as big or minor, but wrapping your head around where can we invest? How do we rally the troops and our customers should we need to do it again? And having that answer documented would be a recommendation.
Absolutely. Thank you both. I really appreciate it. Our questions are kind of slowing down. And it's we're just about 2 minutes over. So thank you everyone for sticking with us today. We hope that this has been informative. We hope that you will consider maybe adding to your digital marketing skills with our fundamentals course or one of the short courses that are coming up as well. You can learn more on our website at learn.uvm.edu. Bill and Erik, thank you so much. I always learn so much from you and I enjoy talking with you. We appreciate your expertise in our course and your expertise today. Have a wonderful afternoon and hope to see you both again soon. Take care.
My pleasure.
See you guys.
Take care.
Bye.
So long.